Hi, and welcome to this talk about AI and generative AI. My name is Marc-André Paquette. I'm principal at CPA Canada. I'm interested in business transformation, digital transformation, as well as the impact of emerging technologies on the profession. I'm here with Mr. Olivier Blais, who is the co-founder and the VP of Decision Science at MoovAI. He also chairs the Canadian Committee, the Canadian Mirror Committee on ISO IEC standards related to artificial intelligence. Olivier, thanks for accepting the invitation. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thanks for inviting me.
In terms of introduction, CPA Canada, as well as its colleagues, its partners, the provincial and territorial CPA bodies across Canada, we are always looking for what is impacting the profession. And obviously, AI is a topic of interest for us since a while now. We have developed some researches, as well as publications on the topic, including one introductory paper on AI and the impact of AI on the profession that we've done jointly with the AI CPA, the American Institute of CPAs. And more recently, beginning of 2023, we obviously heard about ChatGPT or generative AI, such as everyone, obviously. And quickly, it became clear that it would have a significant impact on the profession. So obviously, we have gathered some intel, some information on the topic, and this is what drives the conversation that we're having today. So I've been talking about generative AI, ChatGPT. Olivier, can you please explain what are those concepts, those terms in the context of AI, in the broader context of AI?
Yeah, of course. So let's start with AI, with artificial intelligence. It's kind of a buzzword. But it's not something that's really concrete. It's not real intelligence. It's not robotic. It's not human, and it's not scary. In fact, it's only a philosophy. It's the ability for humans to take a decision or to automate an action based on statistical algorithms. Okay, so when we talk about AI, we're talking about the philosophy. We're talking about like a car, for instance. I'll give you an example. AI is like a car, and the motor, the engine, it's something that's called machine learning. So machine learning, we can talk about algorithms, but at the end of the day, what it is, it's a toolbox of techniques that let you find trends, association in data. Okay, when you have good trends in a historical data, what we think is that you'll be able to identify trend in new data and then predict. Okay, that's a task that we're trying to do, and we can do it in various different ways. We can do it for anomaly detection. We can do it to forecast something like forecast revenues, forecast cash flow. So there are a lot of different use cases, and this is essentially the machine learning part, the engine, and the oil is the data that you need to ingest. So it's very heavy on data, okay? And also, it's quite costly to build an AI solution because you need to build it from scratch. You need to build it based on your data, and you need to do it custom to your needs. But a few months ago, we started to see a new trend. It's generative AI. It's just another take on AI. Instead of building something for you, built with your data, then Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, all these actors, they decided to look at it differently. What if we take all the information from the web and we build a big machine that's able to learn from the trends and learn from everything that is said out there, from blog, from Wikipedia, from different data sources, and we'll be able to create something that's very polyvalent. And it's new for us, but it has been in progress for the past about 5 years, and now it's very good. So this is generative AI. It's the ability to generate something from text information. So you can, for instance, generative AI, you can build from text, you can generate a picture, you can add a picture and generate another picture. So you can generate a lot of different content But what's the most popular use case right now? It's you ask a question in plain text, and then you get a response in text. This is very awesome because it looks like your personal assistant. You can ask questions and then you get answers. Very useful. And this is the heart of the big buzz that we see with ChatGPT. So ChatGPT it's essentially one solution of generative AI. There are other solutions like Palm 2, Claude 2, Cohere. So a lot of other solutions are out there, but they're all based on the same mechanism.
Which is generative AI.
Generative AI.
Okay, well, thanks for that overview of the terms, what are, again, the players and what we can find on the market right now, because I see that there's a lot of applications that are currently available, and I feel that from the moment that we record this and when it's going to be released online, chances are there's going to be more, or maybe even more business case, right? So stay tuned. Definitely, this is current as of today, mid-August. So you're talking about ChatGPT, the impact that it can have on businesses, and now that it's easier than ever to implement AI, because AI used to be complicated, required resources in both in terms of knowledge, people, IT knowledge, but also resources in terms of funds and monies and financing. I've read somewhere that, and actually it was the Think 2020 publication, that they were comparing AI as a cookie jar. And ChatGPT would have taken the cookie jar and put it on the bottom shelf so that all the kids can have a look and can actually take some cookies. So it hasn't created AI, but it has made it easier to understand, easier to apply.
Maybe let me react on the example that you provided. In fact, here what I like about generative AI, it's the democratization, but also it's the user experience. It's one of the few tools, AI tools, in which there's emphasis on user experience. OpenAI, when they built ChatGPT and all the next service provider that followed their step, they said, you know what, how can we make sure people will like using the solution and will then use it and stay engaged to the solution? This is very, very interesting.
Given that context, and given also your obviously experience on the field, what use case can you see, and what specific use can be applied in a CPA context, obviously, or in a business context, by using any form of generative AI?
This here brings a lot of use case. I'd like to bring a precision as well. I know everybody can use ChatGPT right now, but something very interesting is the fact that about 70% of people who have tried ChatGPT have also tried ChatGPT at work for work-related tasks. So this is definitely a business tool. Okay, you can use ChatGPT in your day-to-day business, in your functions. There are different use cases. I can cover some use case. There's a use case about generating text for sure. But here, what does it mean? It means that you can generate, for instance, you can generate reports, you can generate emails, you can generate a lot of different things. But here, I understand for accountant, you need to create a lot of content. You need to create documents. You need to create spreadsheets, and just a very good application is Microsoft Copilot that's getting released in the next very, very shortly. Copilot is the new Clippy, but on steroids. So what you'll be able to do is, for instance, on Excel, you have like a table with a lot of different numbers, like cost per categories of expense, and you'll be able to say, you know what, in free text, you'll be able to say, I want to have a pie chart saying this, or can you do a pivot table doing that? So you won't have to go through, you won't have to do VBA, you won't have to create these very fancy formulas. You'll just simply be, you'll simply have the opportunity to write it down as a prompt, as a command, and then it will generate the modification. You will be able to do the same thing with PowerPoint. So you'll be able to say, can you create a PowerPoint that for this assessment? So you could, we could think about, for instance, importing a financial statement and say, can you build a PowerPoint that explains this with this section, and it will just create the PowerPoints and fill it up with content. It's not just about the template, it's about the content as well. So that's one very neat application of generative AI. Another one is about summarization. So it's still, because you're working with a lot of documents, you're working with data, you're working with financial statement, like a lot of different documents, you'll be able to take these and then you'll be able to summarize it. You'll be able to change the format. So here, what you could think about is, for instance, and I've been working on different projects, like a chatbot that's able to create, to answer information on financial statements using generative AI. And here, what I've realized, I didn't know that before, but sometimes a financial statement for a big company could be hundreds of pages. It's crazy. So how are you able to read it from cover to cover? It takes a long time. It's very, very hard. So being able to extract information and say, okay, talk to me about this element of this financial statement. Then you just import the financial statement and you'll be able to get your information in free text. So it will save a lot of time. It will also enable you to be more efficient because you won't have to read as much. That's another very important one. Another use case, it's about not only analyzing text, but you can also analyze other type of content, like data. So you'll be able to connect to databases or to third-party systems, and you'll be able to ask questions saying, okay, can you show me customers who are in default? And then, because you're able to connect data, you'll be able to so the generative AI solution will be able to generate this list. You don't tell, oh, these are my customers and these are my financial balance. No, just based on tables, based on the name of the columns in your databases, the solution will be able to do that. A solution, because I like to talk about solution. I talked about Microsoft, but I want to be fair, so I'll talk about Google. Google has a very good, very cool feature that's coming. It's called internal search. And with Google internal search, you'll be able to simply configure, so say, tell the internal search tool which are the databases that you want to connect. You can connect internal database, you can connect, it could be text database, but it could also be like numerical value, and SQL databases can be quite complex. You connect everything to this internal search, and then you're able to ask any question you want based on your data, and you'll get the answers. So this changes the game, because you don't necessarily have to know SQL. And also it's because, we tend to wait to have the perfect data. Oh, everything needs to be connected, and it can cost millions, take time. Here, what we're saying is, no, you know what? Now that you're able to connect using one tool that's easy to use, you can connect several databases that don't talk to each other. But you'll be able to ask a question, and then the tool, based on what it saw in other case, what it saw online, it's going to be able to retrieve information from your database to answer the question that you had. So that's also something that's very, very, very powerful.
I'm thinking about all the organization now that has on their to-do list, or that has been postponing that project of merging databases, and or at least trying to compile all data into a single format, or to clean data and everything. You've talked about cleaning data as well. That can help. So rather than to spend some admin time of going through that heavy process that all of us don't want to do because it's not adding much value. It's kind of preparing the next step. Well, we can almost bypass this step, or actually make this process less heavy on our admin by using those tools.
What's interesting with all of this, it's rare that you have the key to the car, you have the key to the house. Usually when Google or Microsoft they build a solution, usually it's black box. You don't know how they got there, but they have good results. Here, what's amazing is you have access to ChatGPT. You also have access to Prompt 2, to Bard, you have access to these tools. They're free or almost free. And it's exactly the same tool, the same tool that is getting used. They just know how to exploit it. They know how to have the good comments, the good prompts. They know how to connect information. So, when, for instance, I gave the example of the databases that you connect to your question. So you have a question, you have databases that are connected. It's essentially the equivalent of a copy-paste in a ChatGPT prompt. That's it. So you can reproduce the same results internally. However, I understand when we're talking about free tools, it has some fallbacks. And yes, I agree. One fallback, for instance, is on data security. Data security, ChatGPT is a good example. ChatGPT sends the request that user generate to the OpenAI server in California. So that's a problem for some company. It's not always a problem. If you ask, can you build a poem on I don't know, on grapes or on something, on whatever, on something, it's not a problem. You can ask even question for your business. But if you say, you know what, can you analyze these financial statements from my customers that are not public? No, you shouldn't do it, because by default, just the fact that it sends the information in the US to a third-party company is a big no in terms of data security. So you can find different ways to mitigate that. But there will be some things that you need to do to mitigate. But I would say, for experimenting, I know a lot of people, they're still in the phase where you need to experiment, when you need to test it. And I think this is important to test it. Like, it's for free. Just be careful with what you put in there. You can ask different questions. You could use financial statements from public companies just to test it out and see for yourself what it gives you. And then after that, what you can do, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, how to mitigate different risks and how to make sure that you're using these tools in a safe manner.
So definitely agree with you on the experimenting phase. Definitely, you're right. The tool, the free version of the tools that are really available, they're there to experiment things. However, we should know the risk, and we'll discuss more about the risk later on. Definitely. So we've talked about those use cases where we can analyze financial information. We'll talk more about prompt or how to build great questions to receive great answers, obviously. We also talked about, previously we talked about the expense reports, like the possibility to just engage with the tool, say, well, today I bought something for $50, and at the end of the month, I ask, like in few days from now, I ask the ChatGPT to, can you build my expense report, please? So all this admin work, that administrative work, that doesn't add really much value. So it's basically just putting the data into another format is very valuable, very, very helpful. Any other insights? And you briefly talked about the financial statement analysis, definitely quite interesting to us. But any other insights in terms of the use cases that we can have?
So you talk about expense report, you're right. I forgot to mention it. Journal entry, is that how we call it in English? Yeah. So journal entries is also a good use case. So if you have information, everything that's not very structured, and you need to change it for the good structure, you can also have a metadata generation. So I know sometimes some of you are using ERPs or accounting softwares, and sometimes you have duplication between systems. Sometimes it's very heavy on manual manual input. So you can change structure, you can generate information. So you have information from one system and you can convert it to another system like this, very easily. You just give the format and say, okay, this information, I want it in this format, and then you can do the conversion quickly. That's one. Something else I didn't talk about. So when I talked about internal search tool, I focus on data, but also let's talk about intranet for a moment. Intranet, it's important. Sometimes you have a lot of lesson learned and a lot of processes that are explained in intranets, but intranets, they're quite hard to use. You have to add stuff into intranets, but sometimes it's hard to search for content, which is like the sole purpose of it. Now what you can do with the same like internal search feature or another tool, you can connect to your intranet, and then you ask question, and it finds the information, and then it then just generate an answer. And also something. So we're talking about the generation capabilities. It's very good to generate text, but it's even better to find text. So like this, for instance, if we're back and we're thinking about this intranet example, how to make sure that you find the right article? It's using generative AI. So generative AI, it's good to also analyze text. And the Microsoft team has compared the search capability of generative AI with the Google search box. And what they realized is that the generative AI search capabilities was about 10 times more powerful than Google search. So here we're talking about, okay, yeah, you'll get an answer that is getting generated, but from meaningful information, because we'll be able to find the right content in your database.
And so the examples that you provide really explain or very put in context what you said earlier about the importance of the user in those tools, right? So the user, the individual that's going to actually use this, is at the center of actually the sole reason of why they put that together, right? So it's I would say even more easy to manage the change or to implement that tool, because people will, I would say, soon realize how valuable and powerful this can be for their activities. That's interesting. Well, you briefly talked about the risks, and obviously as CPAs, we're risk managers, and we focus. Well, we used to focus on risks, but definitely when we talk about all those possibilities to copy and paste financial statements in a tool, definitely there's some questions being triggered, especially since our risk background. So I'm interested to know more about your perspective on the risks and how can we balance the risks with the obvious opportunities of that tool, of those tools.
Yes, so risk is really important. In fact, here, I know that we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I think this is a good segue. The ADA, so the regulation on artificial intelligence and data that's coming, the Canadian Act on AI and data, that's coming in 2024, 2025, depending on who you ask, is going to focus on impact assessment, which is essentially risk assessment. So what you need to do, and it's the same thing with ISO, for instance. So we're all focused on risk. What you need to do is you need to assess properly your risk, and then you need to mitigate your risk, okay? Then there will be a lot of process and control that you need to put in place to ensure that your risk is mitigated and that you are in control, okay? But for us, because it's still not there yet. Like I said, 2024, 2025, right now we're in 2023, and everybody want to experiment ChatGPT. So what I can tell you, or what I can ask you, is to be careful with the tool, and nothing prevents you from doing these type of risk assessment right now. So how do you plan on using the tool? And I can give you some pointers for now. I know it's not the full-blown risk assessment, but I think it's a good overview. So first, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your functionalities that you're building are good, are of good quality. So here what I mean is, if you ask a question or if you automate something, you have good results. It's performing well. Why I'm saying this is because right now we have tools that are so polyvalent. They can do anything, but you don't know how good it is at these things. Sometimes it's very good, and like writing a poem, it's very good. The poem, they're amazing. But how do you know that they will be good to transfer information into another format? Or how can you make sure that they're good at extracting information from a financial statement? You need to validate that, okay? And you could validate it by testing functionalities or testing a question on a financial statement that you know and see, okay, is this matching? Or just by having critical, being critical about the results, and just you analyze what was generated by the system and say yes or no, it's good. So you still need to think about the quality of your output, I want to put emphasis on this because it's super hard to know if it's good or not. Right now, one of the biggest headache for everybody, it's something that's called hallucinations. It's a problem that might occur, and in fact occur quite frequently with generative AI. It's like, you know, you always know someone who's very convincing, but who doesn't know the answer. But he's trying to convince, and he's so convincing that sometimes you say, okay, oh yeah, it makes sense. And then you then accept something that might not be true. And that's a problem with generative AI. Sometimes you'll have an answer, and if you don't ask any question, if you don't know the context, or you don't have the skill set to challenge the results, you might think it's good, it's not. We've seen this like a month ago. There's a lawyer who's now has been guilty of this. He brought examples that were generated from ChatGPT, and they're all fake. He brought up something that never happened in his defense. So, you know, that's a problem. You need to be careful about this, okay? So that's one element. So here, if you're careful about this, if you validate your results, if you keep challenging your results, I think you should be all right. Then you also want to look at the ethics side of things, because it's one thing if you generate something for you only. It's one thing. It's okay, I ask a question, I get an answer. Am I satisfied? Yes or no, that's fine. But if you plan on sharing information with the world or publishing information, automatically, it's especially true when comes a time to automate stuff. When you automate, you lose contact with realities. You lose your safety net. You know, you cannot prevent fake news from happening if you have not built your control properly. Also, something else that might happen, it's when you automate, usually you'll have a bigger impact on more people. So the more people you impact negatively, the worse it's going to get. So you need to ask yourself this question. And right now, what I'm suggesting to people, if you're still experimenting, if you don't master very well the solution, please don't try to automate. Please keep it to yourself and validate your results before you publish them, so you reduce your risk, okay? The last two risks that I'd like to talk, one, I talked about it, it's about security, information security. So for information security, like I said, the free version, be careful with the information because there is a security, there's a pitfall related to security, but there are very good ways of mitigating it. In fact, Microsoft, in their Azure professional services, they have exactly ChatGPT and GPT-4, so the free version, but that have been implemented for businesses. So here, what Azure, what Microsoft decided to do is to offer the same capabilities, but with 100% privacy. So all the information that you provide within the Azure OpenAI services are going to stay within your organization. So that mitigate fully your problem. You have the same thing with Google. Google, it's Google AI Studio, generative AI Studio, and they have the same mechanism. AWS also have equivalent mechanisms. So if you work with your cloud with cloud providers, I don't know if there's yours, but you know they cover they cover a lot of ground. So you are minimizing or eliminating disk security risk, so it's good. So you can copy paste now you can copy paste information from your company, and you can experiment with internal use cases and internal information. And finally, the last one is on the authorship question. When it's internal, it's maybe less of an issue, but sometimes when you plan on sharing externally information, you want to make sure that you have the right. And here, just to let you know that by default, because generative AI has learned from the web, you cannot guarantee that you don't have that you have the right on the content. Sometimes you can have sentences, you can have part of a sentence that has been taken directly from something under copyright. So you need to be careful when you share externally the information. Sometimes you can validate, or sometimes you can just update a little bit your use case to avoid being to avoid this type of risk. But if you plan on, I don't know, I would probably not build, for instance, a tool that just give images that are generated from generative AI, because there's too much risk that these pictures are under copyright. So you just want to be careful if you share information that might be sensitive.
So I like the structure of having 4 different risks, but I wouldn't say the answer of them all. You keep referring to there's a need to have an individual that is kind of controlling what's being input in those solutions and how the results are being used. So there's still a professional skepticism need to use. So you kind of build a case that we should be using them, obviously, but there is definitely a role to play for, I would say, business professionals, or obviously CPAs, that are in relation to what's being put in the tool and how the results are being used. Maybe one other risk, and I'm bringing you somewhere else that we haven't thought of, but maybe a 5th risk would be to do nothing about it, to watch the train pass. And obviously it's a different kind of risk, but I'd be interested to know what's your perspective on sitting this one, right? Or just watching those tools being used, being implemented by obviously suppliers, clients, but competitors and everything. Can you talk a bit more about the risk of, I would say, doing nothing about that?
Yeah, that's a good one. So the risk of doing nothing is going to leave you behind. I know we've been seeing this for the past 10 years. I'm conscious of this. However, here I'm sure everybody heard that AI is the next industrial revolution, blah, blah, blah. We've been saying this for years, but I think we have just been wrong about the timing, because before there were so many things that were preventing AI from being adopted in business. It costs a lot of money, it requires data, it requires people with heavy technical background, it requires a lot of patience, so it requires infrastructures. So that was preventing AI from being very powerful. Now it is. So I'm convinced that now we're entering in a new era, okay? So if you sit this one, and I mean, come on, you just have to test it on a free tool. You take 15 minutes, you test it on you ask 2-3 questions, then you're curious, then you continue. Like, it's fun. It's a fun way of testing a completely new and game-changing technology. So if you sit this one out, so what's going to happen? It's a little bit like Google. If you decided like 20 years ago to not use search engines. Oh, I don't like search engine. I have my bookmarks and I live using bookmarks. Yeah, you're a dinosaur. So when I started my career about 12 years ago, I thought that I had an edge on people because I was very good at searching the web. I was very good to ask the right question on Google. And I read a paper on this. People who were good at searching Google had the best opportunities and they were better than their colleague because they were very good at searching information quickly and they had more knowledge than the other one. Okay, here it's the same thing, but it's even better for power users. So if you're able to use properly generative AI, so it means asking the right question. So you need to ask yourself, you need to find the problem that you need to solve. Okay, that's not an easy one, but if you're able to say, okay, that's a real problem that I can solve using generative AI, you need to be able to verbalize it. You need to be able to communicate about it clearly. You also need to learn how to generate your comment, how to generate your prompt to be very precise. So you need to provide context. You need to provide your question. You need to provide guidelines. So now there are more and more lesson learned that you can find online. If you can do this, you will be able to automate a lot of tasks that you need to do right now. And what you need to do after is, so you have a first version and then you change a couple of elements and that's it. So it will change your role. And still, you need to learn how to do it well, and also you need to learn about the opportunities. But at least if you start, it's like going to the gym. You don't want to go first, and then you go once, you go twice, and then you go every week because it becomes a habit. So when you have this habit of thinking about generative AI and say, oh, you know what? Now I have this problem. Let's use generative AI to solve it. And you'll be very impressed by the number of use cases that it can solve. And here at MoovAI, when we started experimenting with generative AI, I was not very optimistic because it's another tech. I see these tech all the time. Reinforcement learning, we talked about this 10 years ago. It was supposed to be like crazy, and it remained something very technical. And when I started to use it, it changed the way I work. And sometimes I still start, you start a Word document or you start a blog post and you start writing, and then after like 30 seconds, I'm like, what do I do? No, let's start with ChatGPT. You go on ChatGPT, you ask your question, it generates an outline of a blog post, generate like a short version of your blog post. You copy paste it and then you change it and you add a very good first version. That's how you should address things nowadays.
So there's no such thing as a blank page anymore. So
there's no such thing as a blank page. Exactly, I agree with you.
And so you're talking about how to engage with ChatGPT or with any generative AI. You're talking about make sure that you appropriately address the question. You kind of circle exactly what you're trying to achieve. You provide with great context and everything. Seems like you're not engaging with a tool. You're engaging with like someone or a personal assistant or something. Can you talk a bit about that? Like, what's the interaction you might have with a tool, which we compare this to going to the gym or to a car, but the more we talk, the more I see that, is it like an individual? Is it someone that we're talking about?
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's in fact, here I can refer to an article that was written about, I think about 5 years ago by Harvard Business Review, and it's even more realistic these days than it was 5 years ago. But what the author was talking about, it's they were talking about the fact that AI, the relationship between AI and the end users would be very similar to the relationship between an employee and its manager. In fact, when you think about it, it's true. So with your employee, what you need to do, so you need to find the right person. You need to work with the person. So how do you collaborate? So you need to learn how to collaborate. The employee will do some tasks, you will do other tasks. You need to supervise. You need to provide ways of getting retraction. You need to be able to develop its skill set, so the employee skill set. So, and all of these type of tasks, you can all do them with a generative AI application. So you learn how to work with the generative AI application. You need to find the right tool. So here the right tool could be, for instance, I'd like to use Palm 2 from Google, and I'd like to implement it using my own infrastructures and connected to my own databases. That's your employee. And I want to collaborate with it, and I can collaborate by building journal entries, expense report, and then you can just find a list of tasks that the tool can lead, but you still will supervise the output. So you're right, it's a very good comparison.
So, that leads me to probably I'm trying to put the role of the CPA, like where does the CPA fit in the discussion and the implementation? So I'd be curious to know more about what's your perspective when you engage with some clients. Where do you see the finance professional?
I think CPA should be power users of this tool for sure. Like I said before, you're very knowledgeable, you're working with you're building a lot of content, you're building a lot of analysis. It's very heavy on content and knowledge. So there are so many opportunities. But also here, I think you need to work as a safeguard. And here, I'll bring you like a crazy comparison. I've been, and I should have used it in French. So we worked with Ricardo. Ricardo, he's a cook in Quebec, very, very famous in Quebec. And we built a recommendation engine for Ricardo. So recommending meals for people based on their behavior. Yep. And then Ricardo, one day, he called me, he said, "Hey, Olivier, can you..." And he needed reassurance. He said, "You know what? How can I deal with ChatGPT? ChatGPT can generate a meal, can generate a recipe like this. And like I have a big database of recipes, but like, am I a dinosaur? What's the meaning of all of this, since we have a tool that can create a recipe from scratch?" And what I told him is, you know what? You're the reference. You're like, everything that you're building has been tested. And then he said, yeah, it's been tested. It's like, and then he counted, it's tested 9 times every time. So he reproduced 9 times the recipe to make sure it's perfect. So he's a safeguard. Ricardo is a safeguard in the recipe industry. So if you want something, if you want to make sure it works, you go to Ricardo. If you want to experiment, you can use ChatGPT. Here, it's a funny example, but when comes the time to look at finances in a business, it has to work. 1 + 1 has to be 2. Okay, you cannot just improvise. So here, accounting principles, the financials, they have to be right, and everybody can improvise and say, you know what, I'm not an accountant, but here I can do this and that and this, and it looks fine. So you need to be a safeguard, and you need to make sure that you help your company getting the right results, but using generative AI, because it will just make your results a lot faster, and you'll be more efficient as an organization.
So it's all about trust then. I really like that metaphor, obviously comparing CPAs with Ricardo, both providing trust in our respective fields. Definitely trust providers, I'm all about that. So trust that the results or the use of or actually the output of any work is trustable, is reliable, is fit for purpose and everything. Trust that we are using the tools with the appropriate safeguards or the appropriate controls. So easy to talk about controls and safeguards. Well, it's easy to go from this to regulation environment, right? So there's a lot of things going on with regulations, worldwide regulation, not worldwide, but different regulations depending on where you are, depending on your province, your country, depending on who you're engaging with, where are your clients and everything. So obviously you have a hat with the ISO committee. Can you talk a bit more about what you briefly talked about that earlier in the discussion, but the standards, kind of an update on standards, on many regulations and standards around AI and generative AI.
Yeah, no, that's I'll put my hat now. And you know, it's funny because I'm talking innovation like very often, and then you talk standardization, and it seems like two completely different conversations. But in fact, one enables the other one. In my mind, when first, innovation needs to happen first. So you need to have the innovation in order to standardize the innovation itself. But after that, you need to have regulation to make sure you have safe innovation in place. And that's why I think it's important. And I'm very glad to see that Canada, along with the European Union, we are precursor in terms of regulation. This is very, very good. I'm very proud of our country. And also something else that I really like is the fact that sometimes we have the tendency to reinvent the wheel in Canada and say, you know what, let's build like a regulation from scratch. Here, what was built in the ADA, AI and Data Act, is the fact that it gives like a very high level set of principles. It's it's about mitigating the individual harm, the collective harm, and the biases, negative biases. Okay, so that if your application is at risk of harming people or generating biased results and potentially discrimination, then here you are what we call a high impact system. And when you have a high impact system, this is where now you need to build a bunch of process and a bunch of controls. Everything to make sure that you are in control. You are building a safe tool, but it's all based on international standards. So we didn't reinvent the wheel here. We just said, you know what, this is our goal. The goal is to have safe, high impact application, but we'll do it using the international knowledge, the knowledge from organizations like ISO standards. And ISO standard also is more experienced. So we've been, just for the AI, we've been, for I think it's about 5 years, you know, we're probably thousands of experts building standards. A lot of standards are coming now, where like in 2023, we'll see a lot of standard appearing, and we'll be able to use them right away. One standard that is really important, it's called the 42001. It's the AIMS, so the AI Management System standard, and also something else that's good for Canada, but it has been led by Canadians. Okay. So Canada, we're right in the middle. We're building very sound and we're very proactive regulation. We're also participating heavily in ISO standard, and we are leading the most important the management standard. That is one of the most important standard for conformity assessment. And this right now we currently have one pilot project with a financial institution in Canada. So right now, we already have one financial institution that did their conformity assessment using the 42001 standard. So we're getting there, and we'll soon see these in action, so we'll be able to use it. But meanwhile, you know what? If we're following up the guidelines that I provided before, everybody's responsible to make sure they're using properly tools, but help is coming.
So you briefly talked about ISO, well, the standards and regulation. Regulation is coming later on, 2024, 2025, and it's going to be applied to a subset of AI usage, right? ISO, from our previous discussions, we're developing standards or best practices for many types of organizations, right? We even talked about small business and small medium businesses. There was a consideration for implementation in small medium businesses. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I can. So ISO, I think this is very relevant. Thank you. ISO is not industry specific by design. We have some industry specific items that we deal with, but usually ISO will be for across country and across industry. So we're building standards that are across industries, and then usually if you have if some industries have particularities, sometimes they will build like something on top of the ISO standards, but generally speaking, it's mostly generic standards. But Canada, what we decided to do, and we're doing it as we speak, so I cannot talk about like the results, but we're having discussion on, okay, which vertical do we want to focus on? Do we want to focus on finance? Do we want to focus on SMB, small and medium businesses? Because we know in Canada, most businesses are small or medium, and we're very sensitive about this. And you know what? I'm chair of the Mirror Committee, and MoovAI were considered a small business. So it's just an example of the emphasis that we put on small and medium businesses. So what we want to do is we want to find ways of enabling small and medium businesses to comply to ISO standards. It sounds weird because people would want to comply, but you know what? If you cannot comply in 2024, 2025, it means that you will prevent small and medium businesses from building high impact systems. So what it means probably small and medium businesses will not be able to work in healthcare, to work with government, to build system that will be available to all Canadians. So that can have a big impact, and this is why here we want to make sure that we're able to create more digestible standards that could be implemented efficiently for small and medium businesses.
Very interesting, and obviously thanks for considering those small businesses. But at the end of the day, standards are a compendium of best practices, right? So this is why I think organization will need to have a look at those standards when they'll come into effect or when they'll be available. Definitely to just structure our discussion on that. So speaking of discussion about AI and generative AI, seems that we started the discussion right on about the topic. Thank you very much, Olivier, for providing your thoughts on that. I see, or I feel that the starting discussion needs to be, well, what needs to be done with generative AI, right? And we talked about that. Maybe the best way to start the discussion is actually for a CPA to open ChatGPT and ask, providing my context, providing my experience, providing the reality of my business, how can ChatGPT be used in my own context? So maybe that's the first prompt we can suggest people.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You'll see a lot of use cases. Sometimes they're unrealistic, but you know what? Test something afterwards and you'll see results right away. Search online, there are so many people. Right now, almost everybody's using ChatGPT or using generative AI. So it's easy to find people who are using it and to work with them and say, okay, what did you do? How do you use it? And work as a community. So yeah, I think first step, let's use ChatGPT to ask what to do with ChatGPT. I agree with you.
It can, it even solves the problem with yourself. So thanks, Olivier, for providing those. So thank you for listening in today. And I invite you to have a look at the resources that are available on our website, on our professional CPA buddies across Canada's websites as well. And stay tuned for next publications on the topic.
Thank you.